So you think that you can tell us how to live our lives, never questioning the source from which your moral code derives. You think that suffering is part of some great plan that's been devised. I wonder what will it take for you to start opening your eyes. I wonder.
We made it.
Hello and welcome to the Atheist Experience. Today is Sunday, August 5th, 2018, and I'm your host, Tracie Harris. With me today is co-host Phil Session.
Yes, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Doing very well.
I've not sat with you in a while.
It has been a minute. It's been a real, my goodness, it's been months.
Yeah, it seems like it anyway. The Atheist Experience is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a Texas nonprofit educational organization dedicated to promoting separation of church and state and positive atheist culture. I just want to make sure that for announcements, people know that they can come and join us after the show today for dinner at the ACA studio, which is located at the FREETHOUGHT Library. We're going to have sandwiches tonight, and the library is located at 1507 KOENIG Lane here in Austin. And have a couple of other special announcements. We have our Bat Cruise coming up on September 22nd. We're going to have MANDISA Thomas, who is going to be our speaker. She's with Black Non-Believers and also on the board of American Atheists. And we also have our own Matt Dillahunty, who will be doing a magic show.
Right.
So it's fun. If you've never seen Matt do his magic, it's quite astounding.
It's pretty awesome.
You know, all the tricks, I get so enamored of just the things he does with a rubber band, right? Like he'll do the little rubber band tricks, and I'm just like, I'm amazed. Magic is real. So yeah, it doesn't take much, I guess, to pull one over on me, but other people are amazed by it too. It's not just me. I'm not the only. It's not like other people are laughing and pointing.
Oh, yeah,
so
it's a pretty awesome show. Yeah.
So if he can do that with rubber bands, imagine what he can do in a whole show.
Yeah, that'll be happening right before the pre-cruise lecture by MANDISA Thomas.
Yeah.
We'll be there, that same venue. So
Oh, great. Yeah, that's good to know, the location.
Yeah.
But yeah, tickets are already on sale, so
Yes.
go ahead and get them.
Yes.
You can get them at the ACA website. I don't know if they're available anywhere else, but
No, everything links you to the ACA website,
Okay.
and it's gonna be a very good chance of selling out.
Wow.
Just looking at the actual, since we talked about that today in the board meeting, as far as the sales that were coming in each week, I need to get mine.
Yeah.
I just try to get up on that.
it's a fantastic weekend. If you're from out of
awesome.
town and you've been thinking, hey, I'd like to make a trip to come see the show, some people actually do that. And so
Yes.
if you're one of those folks who's been thinking it might be fun to come to Austin and see a live show, and you're from out of town, I'm just going to say Bat Cruise weekend is a great weekend to do that.
It is awesome.
It's just the best. Also, just an announcement that ACA is still looking for volunteers for Pride, which is this coming Saturday.
Yes, the 11th.
And if you're interested, you can send an email to tv@atheist-community.org with subject line Pride Volunteer, so that we can identify that.
Yes.
And so that it doesn't get lost in the mail, because we do get tons of mail.
There's a lot in there. So for those that show up and
please.
actually want to volunteer for that, all you have to do is commit to usually about a 2-hour time frame to work the booth, because we'll be out there the entire day. It'll probably be myself and Jen actually going out there to set up, and then we'll be out there the whole day. We have lots of swag items, which I'm super excited about.
I heard there's some new swag.
There is some new swag, along with the rainbow bracelets and the koozies and the rainbow fans, which I was so proud of, because that was so much work that went into those fans. You just don't know.
Wow.
But we have this time, we just ordered, and I got 2 boxes full of tote bags, so the reusable grocery bags with the ACA logo on there, which will be super awesome, and people can use them, actually see what's going on, see that little logo sitting
think
on the
that's
side
great.
there, and that information is so.
People love bags at events like that.
Right,
Because you get
right.
so much stuff, so much swag is
so
handed
bad.
out that you need something to carry it in. So
But yeah, if you volunteer
It's the
and commit to that 2-hour time slot or so, then you can get free tickets sponsored by the Atheist Community of Boston. So you get there, you serve your time. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
why, working the booth and talking with people coming up to the booth, and you after that window is over, you get to roam around the park and didn't have to pay that entry fee to get in there in the first place. And so it's an awesome little perk. So if you're interested in that, reach out, as Tracie said, to tv@atheist-community.org and attention Jen or Pride or something along those lines, so that we can really identify where your email is. It doesn't get lost in the shuffle of that big email, because it's
All
a
right.
lot. So yeah, that is Pride weekend.
do you got anything else?
I do. I usually, of course, go over volunteer events as things that are coming up, because
Sure.
that is what I do.
He's the volunteer guy.
Wow, that's what we do. But I did want to talk. I want to thank the folks that came out this past weekend. We actually had an event on Saturday and today. So we were out at the Central Texas Food Bank, and we helped pack up just under 10,000 pounds of bread and pastries, which
Wow.
is difficult. Once you're looking at these, these huge cakes and things, you're just passing them by and putting them in boxes. And
That's tons of food.
yes, literally.
Yeah, I mean, that's, oh, sorry. That was very loud, sorry.
But it was amazing, and it looked delicious as it was just passing by all these croissants and the garlic knots and the different kinds of cheesecakes and everything else, and it looked so delicious. But also we had the Austin Atheists Helping the Homeless just this morning at 9:15. It was super hot, super humid that was out there, but we served just under 250 people out there. It took about an hour and 15 minutes for everyone to go through that line, and so it was amazing. We had like 24 volunteers that came out for that. It was an amazing.
That is amazing.
Experience. And people that dropped off supplies here, like Polly, I'll give her a shout out. She dropped off some tissue and socks on yesterday, which we did indeed need to use. And it was just an awesome experience. And so that happens the first Sunday of every month. So the next one of those will be September 2nd, will be the next one. And so I'll be going over the inventory. There's a truck outside right now full of stuff.
That's pretty amazing.
That I have to inventory, and I'll put that list out there.
It's amazing to me what you coordinate, what you handle and get done. Like, I mean, I know you do it with lots of hands.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know, but
there's
just
no way I can do
very
this.
grateful that you're here to do that, just letting you know.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And
Well,
just for context, I just want to say I just now Googled it, and 10,000 pounds of food would be the equivalent of 5 killer whales in weight.
Oh, wow.
There you go. And then I did it again. I made a loud sound into the...
And that, we need that little logo, the more you know star rainbow sign. Just
I think we just
scrolling
need
up.
like a big, how many killer whales, like 3 and 5, and
That's how we
everything's measured
We measured
in
that
killer
food
whales.
up there. But we also, was that all? I think that is all that I had
That's a
for this one. I did want to give a small shout out. There was an email that we received on this past week from Rebecca that said, I won't give anything more about that, but she sent an email to us thanking us for being here, because the one person that she did know in her community passed away, and she kind of latched on to us and was really grateful that we were here doing this show so that she can have some semblance of community. But I did want to reach out just to say, give you a shout out first of all on the show, and to say, hey, you're not alone, and we appreciate you, and I'm glad that the show means something to you, and that you would write that in. That really means a lot, and so I kind of want to put that out there. You're not alone. We're here with you. Send us an email, all that kind of good stuff, and we're a global community now on the webs and doing all the things. So we're here for you. So take care out there.
Absolutely.
But I think that's all. I had.
Okay, I did just want to mention one more thing that's not really an announcement, but last time I was on, there was a theist caller named Alex who had issued a challenge to take some sort of a little exercise, a week-long exercise to endeavor to see Jesus. You would get a manifestation of Jesus if you did this thing.
That's interesting.
And at the end of the call, he said that I should ask Jesus to manifest, and so I did, and he's just like, now if you do everything we talked about in the call, then you'll see Jesus.
Okay.
So what I did was not spend the week away from all media. But I did issue the call and also outline it for some folks on my wall and asked if anybody was interested in doing it, taking that challenge. And so some people did step forward and they did take the challenge. And I put together a 10-question survey at the end of it, just kind of confirming different things. And, the way I asked the questions was intended to sort of mix it up a bit, but I'm trying to just get to the truth of, what did you do during that week? Did you do the things that were required, not do the things that were required, and we will discount anybody that, and to be fair, I've already spoken to one person that they can be discounted. They did make some mistakes. They still have thoughts on the test, though, and so I'm going to talk to, I think, the producer and just ask about potentially having some of those people talk about the experience of what they did. And I have not looked at the survey results yet, so I say this, speaking blindly at this point because I haven't seen what they finally came back with. But they all did come to me. I told them to contact me when they were done, and I would send them a survey link, and they could take the survey. So at this point, by the end of today, we should have our final survey entry, and I will be able to look at that data and then see what we finally have, if anything. And I, like I said, may want them to come on and talk a little bit about what they did and their experience.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So were you in a position to talk about your experience with the challenge now, or did you want to wait?
I didn't do it.
Oh, you didn't do it yourself?
No, I didn't do it.
Okay.
But since everything I needed was in the call, right? The person said that if I did everything we had talked about, so I think it's clear that everything that a person would need to know was in the phone call. So I went back through the phone call. I pulled out all of the information, everything you were supposed to do, everything you were supposed to abstain from, everything that you could do, things you were encouraged to do, and put that out. And I also had everybody listen to that phone call. I had everybody, I put down the instructions, and so we'll see what happens.
Okay.
So that's that.
All right.
So right now we're going to go to Reza in California, who says that he wants to talk about morality as it pertains to atheism. Hi, Reza. You're on with Tracie and Phil.
Hi. How are you guys?
We're very good.
Doing
thank
all
you.
right.
Good. So atheism, you do not believe in any objective morality, do you?
You do not believe in any objective morality.
How are you defining objective morality?
I mean, if we are all a result of evolution, right? There's no difference between humans and dogs and bacteria.
I wouldn't say there's no difference
Right.
between them, because then we wouldn't be able to tell a human from a dog.
I don't mean the appearance. I mean in value, in reality.
Well, there's a difference in value when it comes to intraspecies, right? I mean, like, for example, dogs recognize and acknowledge other dogs differently than they do, for example, a chicken, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, within the species,
prejudice.
within the species, there is a valuation that happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So my question is, let me give you an example. Let's say my best friend dies. Okay? Why should I not eat him? It's a good source of protein.
Why should you not what him?
Eat him.
Eat him?
Eat him.
Yeah.
Well, I would avoid the brain because there's some dangers associated with eating a human brain. I think generally speaking, if you're asking if it would be immoral to eat a dead body, and if you're asking me, like, would that, for example, be a situational thing? I don't know that it would be an immoral act, because you're not really violating a person anymore. It's no longer a human being. Now, there are some people that would be put off by that, and I can see why people would be disturbed by that. But if you're saying you didn't kill the person, I'm not sure that it falls into an immoral act so much as a grotesque act.
And it would also depend on the culture. Like, those beliefs and the way that bodies are treated.
Yeah, I mean, there are ritualistic.
Change,
there are cultures where it is a ritualistic thing to eat parts of the dead person as a sign of respect, for example. And I would say that they would not consider that an immoral thing, and I really wouldn't either, because it's not like they killed the person to make a casserole from them. they were. Well, you understand what I'm saying, right? I mean,
Straight to
so
casserole.
if you're, to me, an immoral action has to somehow elicit harm, in a way. Now, you could talk about the idea of maybe secondary types of harm where you upset other people that might be, let's say, related to your friend.
Sure.
So you could look at it from the perspective of how does this impact the relatives, or how does this, and I think that, again, would be like a cultural contextual thing. Most societies probably would consider it really not a good thing to be eating dead people, but I'm not sure that I would do you consider it like an immorality? And if so, like the immorality is perpetrated against whom?
No, my question, I'm sure you're noticing that we are at leads, right? Because you could ask so many other questions if your morality is just based on our species surviving, so that's going to help our species survive, because that's another source of
I don't know that
food.
my morality is based on our species surviving. There might be things that I would do that could lead to death that I would
That's the whole point of
consider.
evolution, right?
Well, I don't know that evolution has a point. I think that it goes toward survival because things that
Tend to fare
that
better.
survive better are going to
Have a better chance of
and
procreation
I would
continue
agree
the
that there
gene.
is a sense of wanting to survive in most people and in most species that exist today. So I don't think that, but I'm not sure that the basis for morality is ensuring the survival of the human species. Like, let's say that the human species turned really horrible and they were doing awful things to everyone, and I saw this happening and there was no way to stop it. They were just ripping each other to shreds, and ultimately what was going to survive would be the most horrible specimens. And I decided let's just end all of this. Now, I might end all of it in my head thinking it was a merciful thing to do to kill us while we still have our humanity.
Right. Why should we care about our humanity surviving? Now, if I ask you why is it bad to kill my friend, you would say that because you want to live, he wants to live, let's live together, right? So that's the whole basis for the atheistic morality. We want to live. Why do we want to live?
Right? I don't know that. I think. Wait. I think that is like one aspect of it is recognizing having the ability to empathize with another person, right? I agree that that's part of what constitutes what I would put in the basket of moral tendencies, for example. So I recognize that someone else wants to live. I recognize I want to live, but I'm not sure that the basis for my morality is that everyone survives. Like, I'm not sure that I can say that. I think that there are...
But you can say that you want to survive, right? Why do you want to survive?
But I might not always want to survive. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
it's like I do now, and I want to because this is just an inherent thing. And that's kind of what you were asking earlier, was this question of why should we care? And I'm not sure that's the right question or the right statement. I think that it's more a statement of why do we, not why should we. We do. It's not a question of should we, it's a question of we do.
Well, when it comes to the next steps, the very basic steps, yes, you are right. The question should be asked that way. But the next step is different. When you get out of that level and you go to the next level, we need legislation. Let's say, I can't.
Well, legislation is different than morality, though.
Sure.
Right. But my question is why? Let's say you go outside, right? You go outside. Why don't you punch someone in the face because you think it's bad? Or there is a kid, why don't you kick him, right? Because it's bad.
I mean, because for me, I look at that and say, like, well, what kind of society would I want to be in? You know, looking at those actions and empathizing with how that makes, like, actually recognizing that doing so would cause harm to someone else, and recognizing that harms the society that I would want to actually be in and live in. Recognizing that for me, living together as a society is more beneficial for my survival going forward.
And I think that's kind of more of an outcome of morality than morality, right? That's what it gives us, the society that is nice to live in.
Right.
But I think that...
Why do you want to live in a... basically, my question is, how do you how do you get the nihilism out of the table? How do you put a value on your life and living?
Because we have not evolved.
In a peaceful.
You don't reach this stage of evolution and be inherently nihilistic broadly. I'm not going to say that there aren't people that are going to have nihilistic tendencies, because all tendencies and traits are on a bell curve where you've got people on either end and then you've got this majority that happens in the middle. But as a rule, it's going to be very hard for somebody to not want to fight for their life, for example, if someone's trying to kill them. To say like, well, why are you doing that? I think most people wouldn't even think about why am I? Most people aren't sitting there and saying, well, what should I do in this situation where someone's coming at me with a knife? I don't even think it goes to that level. I think that you're going to fight for your life 9 times out of 10, and like I say, unless you're on the end of that curve, because it's just an inherent thing about human beings. And so the question would be, why would you want to ditch it, right? Because it's already there. So now the question is, why would you want to get rid of it? Not why would you want to do it, because doing it is an inherent aspect of being a social species.
Right, but with that explanation, there is no value. You cannot put a label of good.
I don't agree that there's no value, because a person will fight to the death to protect their life, and I think that's a lot of value that's being demonstrated.
Like how you put a value on that? It's just
you put a value on it of I'm willing to kill someone to save my own life. I mean, that's a value, right? That it's worth a life to me to survive, is what that would say.
Your life would mean anything.
I don't understand, I guess, the question. It's inherent. I don't know how else to describe it. It is an inherent, like if you try to kill a dog, if you try to kill a tiger, it is going to fight for its life. It has a value on its life, and I'm sure that tiger isn't sitting around reading philosophy and trying to figure out why it cares whether or not it survives. I don't think people are any different. I think we do issue justifications after the fact, but I think the reality is it's just there.
Okay, let's move on. Can I answer one of the questions that I have seen on your shows a lot?
Can you answer one? Yeah, sure.
Yes, I have seen a lot of atheists. They say, if God created everything, who created God?
I have heard that, yes.
Yes. Okay, I'll try to make it as simple as I can. Let's say you walk to your home, you open the door, and you see that the floor is wet, right?
Okay.
Somebody has been walking there. It's a footstep which is wet. At that moment, you can ask that floor why you're wet, and the answer would be a wet shoe was walking on me, right?
Okay.
And then you go and find the shoe, right? And the shoe is wet. At that time, you can ask that shoe why you're wet, and the answer would be, I was walking on a wet grass, let's say.
Okay.
And you go to the grass and you can ask the same question, but that question is valid for so long. When you reach the water itself, you cannot ask that question. You cannot ask the water why you're wet, because the water is wet. Otherwise, it wouldn't be water, right?
Right. So people exist and they just exist, right? And asking why.
Now, if I add, now that we can use that analogy to explain why you cannot ask that same question, the question of who created God. That question is not valid, because let's say if you have an iPhone, you can ask who created you.
But we can explain why water is wet, right? I mean, there's chemistry to this and to how people interact with water that makes water wet.
I mean, it's our description of the property of water that what we define it as wet.
That's our expression.
Well, because it's our experience.
Sure, it's our reality around us.
Who else is going to define it?
Right. That's our understanding of water, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Now, exactly. If you ask a human being who created you, that's a valid question. But you cannot ask the same question for God, because God is the creation itself, or himself, or herself, or whatever.
How do we know this?
Right. Shouldn't we substantiate that first, or just kind of skip right over
And I guess, so if something can exist, if something can exist without a creator, then why does the creation need a creator?
Again, the same thing. You can go back to the same analogy, right?
Why ask the universe why it exists?
Exactly. Why do you ask the floor?
Exactly.
Why floor is wet?
Yeah, all right,
Why do
well,
you ask
thanks
the
for your
floor
call.
that's wet?
That cleared it up. Thanks, Reza. And now we are moving on to Chris in Hollywood, California, who wants to let us know that atheists haven't followed the evidence where it leads. Hi, Chris. You're talking to Tracie and Phil.
Oh, hey guys, how are you?
Hey, how are
Oh,
you?
cool.
I'm good.
Okay.
So I've actually, this has to do with something that Matt has said in the past. Obviously, he's not on the show, but I believe, Tracie, you were on the show at the same time, a few different times, where you mentioned that, wherever the conclusion or the evidence lies or heads to, you have to go with
Sure.
the conclusion regardless of whether or not you agree with it, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys have talked in the past about how, when you look at a building or a chair, or maybe a chair is a bad example, maybe a building or, anything that requires design, you automatically know that someone created the building or whatever the object is, correct? I mean,
Yeah.
we can assume that.
Yeah, if I know what,
building-
I understand buildings and I understand how they're made, and so I understand when I see one what it took to make it.
Sure, we have comparisons to make and data to compare for something like that.
Right. Well, when it comes to, I would say, let's say we take a look at a tree. Every tree, or I can't think of a specific, let's say like a giant sequoia tree, Sequoia National Forest.
Sure.
For the most part, every tree has the same design, intrinsic design. They might have a few differences in, the branches and the amount of leaves on each tree, but for the most part.
Yeah, the structures of trees are similar. That's why they're trees.
Right. And all that happens is just fluctuations in the amount of leaves and stuff around it. So my question is, when you see that there's, I'm trying to avoid the word design because I know you're going to say, that doesn't mean there's a designer, but,
Right.
The point
No,
is
that's okay.
that-
I understand what you're saying. You're talking about similar structure.
Right. So they have a similar structure, but, when you come down to the very, essence of the tree, there is, in fact, instructions for how the tree should grow if everything goes right, as well as, humans and animals. Most dogs look pretty much the same when, 4 legs, a tail, everything else. But the only thing that fluctuates is maybe one might have a birthmark, or one might have, a tooth that looks, maybe not grown properly, or a nose that has
No, I understand what you're saying. There's a basic structure to the thing we call dog.
Right.
Yeah.
So my question is,
Okay.
how do we combat the fact, or how do we argue against the fact that maybe not, we might not have enough evidence to say that there's a creator, but at least at the fact that there seems to be some kind of intent or purpose.
Ooh, wait a minute. How do you get to intent? Where is where are you getting the idea that there's an intention that a dog should have 4 legs rather than it does?
Well, the fact that, when we come down to the DNA level of the DNA or
Okay, there's DNA.
Biology. Mm-hmm. It could be anything, I guess, in theory. It can be anything, but no, it has specific instructions to become a dog, right?
DNA does drive the attributes of the dog, just like it drives the attributes of all things, but I don't understand where you're getting that these are the attributes it's supposed to have. This is what the DNA is, but you're saying it's supposed to be that, and I'm asking how you know that.
Well, the DNA, right. Well, I mean, it sounds like, because you said this is what the DNA is, not what it's supposed to be. But it's not like you can, roll a dice and, this thing might come out to be a whale. There's specific instructions for every species.
But actually, we do have DNA that produced a whale. So you do roll a dice and get a whale sometimes.
Right. But that means it has to come from DNA that belonged to a previous whale, to the parent whale. It doesn't come from, it's not like you have DNA that becomes anything. There's specific DNA for every species. There's different kinds.
Right, but there's also a lot of overlap in DNA between the species, right? I have 2 eyes and a dog has 2 eyes, right? I have legs and a dog has legs. I have a heart and a dog has a heart. A whale has a heart. So there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of things we all share in common that comes out of DNA.
And we also recognize.
And when I
that-
say all, I mean many species. I understand, for example, that an ash tree doesn't have a heart and that there's not legs on a on a worm or something. But the idea is DNA is sort of all over the map, and you seem to think that there's some purpose to it. And I'm saying I don't see evidence for a purpose. I see that these things are, but I don't see any reason to think that there was something previous that said this is what it should be.
And we recognize that those instructions, that DNA can also mutate over time, and that's just a part of it as well. And with sufficient mutations, you may get some speciation where it can no longer breed with sufficient ancestors. At some point, that's what we call it a different species, when it can no longer interbreed. That speciation that happens there. So.
Okay, I mean, that's a good point. I guess what I would say is, I mean, isn't it possible that, I think there's been or I don't know if this is a study or maybe I heard it somewhere that there's been more species that have gone extinct than there are existing at this time.
I've heard that, and I it wouldn't surprise me, so I'm not going to take issue with it.
Okay, and I know this for a fact that supposedly a little more than 2,000 species a day go extinct because there's so many variations that they consider that, they say this species does exist, extinct. It's like a very, very small subset of an iguana, but it's in some island where it's a very small population.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of development kills off, things, especially in, I think, the Central and South America. I think in the Amazon region, there's a lot of concern about lost species that were. But I mean, I understand what you're saying. And I think I understand what you're getting at. What you're basically saying is that there's this DNA, and the DNA makes you wonder if there's not some plan in place that would. And that's the part where I guess I don't see what you see, but I still think what you're trying to convey is that something about the fact that DNA drives attributes makes you have this impression that there's something that means those attributes are supposed to be the way they are, and not just these are the attributes that came out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that what I would say is this is going to be maybe an incredible leap to what I just said, but if we go obviously way back, before the Big Bang or whatever, before the universe was in its current state, I would say, it seems like this is going to be a huge red flag for you guys, but it seems like there was something, some kind of something that willed for anything to have order, I mean, if there was no structure.
But wait a minute, I have to stop here, because the description that we got on your call was that atheists haven't followed the evidence where it leads. But you and I agree on the evidence. What we don't agree on is whether or not it implicates purpose, right? And I don't see the evidence for where you're moving from DNA drives attributes to DNA was created and intended to drive attributes. I don't see that evidence.
Because what would that also say about the millions of species that
have gone extinct?
Right. What
was the purpose of them? Right. They're just to die out.
Came and gone, but they were designed to come and go and just kind of be out of there. So that.
Yeah, I mean, there's
an interesting perspective.
Because there's a whole lot to the universe beyond DNA, and there's radiation and vacuums and just empty space and deadly cold, and I mean, it's
gravitational holes.
Yeah, black holes that are sucking. I mean, it's kind of a large, weird universe that has lots and lots of strange stuff going on, and I'm not sure that to me there's a definite purpose that I see in all of this.
Well, isn't it possible that I mean, when there was way more species in the past before, a lot of them died out because they couldn't adapt or whatever. I mean, it's possible that they all had or maybe not a specific purpose, but they all had their own specific, designs or, DNA. But obviously, isn't it possible that there could be, we can marry that concept of there's a lot of different species, and, you can also have the possibility that the survival of the fittest theory or whatever, some of them just died out, not because.
No, I think they did. I think that's probably exactly what happened. But I also want to note that, we got to remember that if we're talking about where does the evidence lead us, when we start to use the thoughts of is it possible, what we're looking at then is a hypothesis, right? What you're looking at then is a further question, what you're basically saying is, I see this thing in DNA and I think this merits further investigation to see if there's a purpose. Is that fair?
Yeah, and actually to answer your question about, you were told that my original subject about calling was not following the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I would say, I hear you guys a lot, talk a lot about, the burden of proof is on a person making the claim, right?
Sure.
But so, people that say, the universe was, or actually, okay, that brings back to my point. So I guess I kind of lost myself. So the fact that, buildings and everything else man-made has a designer, right? A watch, has a
Sure.
designer, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Sure, we build things.
And then we see things in nature, which, again, even scientists themselves refer to it as like, this DNA has instructions on how to...
Right, but I mean, here's a question. Let me just interrupt for a moment. Don't we contrast the things that human beings make and design with things that just occur in nature? Isn't that the contrast to design? When I'm talking about a thing that's designed, like my automobile, and then I'm saying like a rock or a tree or a volcano, isn't that the opposite of a design? That's not the natural world, which is in contrast to the things that human beings create and design. That's what we use to compare and contrast design is the natural world you're appealing to as the design. And I'm saying that's how we differentiate design from nature. And what happens is sometimes we'll find things like we'll find rocks under the ocean that looks like steps, and someone will say, oh, was this maybe a submerged city, or is this just a natural formation, right? And so the question that we're asking is this just something that nature did, or is this something that is designed, that people make these steps? And then we have to investigate to see. And so it's a fair question to say, I'm looking at something and it makes me wonder if this was designed, and I'd like to do more research, or I'd like to investigate more to see if I can answer that question. But what I don't think is fair to say is, I see this phenomenon in nature, therefore it's designed, because, and I don't even know why, because it literally it's the thing we contrast design with when we're trying to describe something designed as opposed to something that just occurred naturally and wildly.
And we use a lot of that basis, like we look at our own history and our own creations in order to make that determination of what something that was man-made. So when we're looking at buildings, we understand what buildings are. We can research the blueprints. We can look it up.
Right, we're comparing it to things that people have designed.
We look at data points that are around to actually, so even when we're looking at ancient
But you can do it with the nest, right? So if you're looking at a batch of leaves and someone wants to know, was this a bird's nest up there in that tree, or is it just a bunch of leaves that fell? Or, and so you could go up and investigate to see, was this some sort of an animal nest, or was this, so we can even look at animal nests and see, was this just something that occurred, like a bunch of sticks and leaves just fell into this crevasse in the tree, as opposed to an animal put this together. So we do differentiate between design and non-design, but what's ironic to me is that we use nature as our contrast, and you seem to be using it as an equivalency.
Okay, well, how about we take something specific, like let's say like an apple tree, right?
Well, sure, because those are designed, right? Like we have designed an apple tree. I mean, people have intervened to produce apples and apple trees.
Right, but we got the idea from, a naturally occurring, apple tree. So I guess my question would be, what evolutionary benefit does a tree have to produce, let's say apples, what most trees or most plants have some kind of...
Well, generally you want those, to be crude about it, you want the seeds to be eaten. So you put them into a fruit so that they will be eaten and ultimately deposited, or either the fruit will be either the fruit will be partially eaten and discarded, or the seeds will be eaten and then later excreted. But the benefit to bearing fruit is spreading seed generally. Now some trees and fruit trees don't do that, but that's because people have intervened and reproduce them. And that gets into a whole thing about propagation of food.
Wait, so you're saying that the tree has a goal to... No,
I didn't say it has a goal. I said the benefit when you're asking what is an evolutionary benefit to the tree, what I'm saying is that when you have seed in fruit, it's more likely to make it to the ground and be deposited or eaten, and a lot of seeds require scarification, which might be helped along by a bird's digestive system or something like that. But I'm simply saying that it would result in survival of that species.
Yeah, they would
and
be-
evolution is inherently set up that species that are not as concerned with survival are not going to survive as well.
Right, that tree might have a better chance of passing
Right,
on
the trees
genes
that
and
did not
keep
have good survival
May not have
mechanisms, aren't around today.
But that's where I'm a little confused. So you're talking about survival, but I mean,
Right.
for that specific tree, I mean, once it dies, let's say its lifespan is 200 years, whatever.
Right.
How does getting its seed, processed or a bird or whatever, having it plant another tree, how does that ensure its own lifespan?
It doesn't.
It doesn't. That's a brand new tree. So
Right.
How do we rationalize that has any benefit to
Because
that?
there isn't a purpose to it. That's what I'm trying to tell you. What you're saying is it doesn't seem like there's any real purpose or benefit. And it's like, well, there's not. I mean, it's basically producing something, and then the species goes on because species that didn't have mechanisms that helped them to go on into the future didn't make it into the future. So the things that are here now develop strategies that were, help them to survive. And when I'm using language, and so you have to understand that I am harnessed by language here, but the fact is it doesn't help that tree survive. There is no benefit to that specific tree, and that should be one flag for you that maybe this is more of a functional thing that just is a natural process than a purpose.
Because it may have just been a mutation that happened between one generation to the next of tree that happened to make
and then
the
that
second
one,
generation
right.
to survive a little better.
Those species survive better.
And
It doesn't mean that they're trying. I don't think that the apple tree is thinking about this, right? I don't think
gotta
that
make
there's
the best apples.
Yeah, it's not like that there is a purpose behind it. It's just that things that survive better survive better. It's it's a tautology.
I just feel like, I feel like based on what you said, you made some good points, but one can argue that, both the bird and the tree are, you said that the tree is not, obviously thinking about it, she doesn't have some grand plan, but I would say one can argue that the bird and the tree are kind of, I guess, oblivious to the plan behind it, they're part of a system.
But I think the problem is that the idea that they're driven by survival, this is almost like the morality discussion we had in the prior call. Just because these inherencies are there, just because these instincts are there, right, doesn't mean that they're there for a purpose. It means that this is what has developed, and this is what we are now, and this is what exists today. And I fully expect that in 5,000 years, things are going to be very different. If they're still here and we still have species, there's probably going to be some differences. And we know from the archaeological record that there are some differences in the past, right? That things have changed. And we understand the evolutionary mechanism behind that change. We use it in artificial, when we do artificial selection, when we're doing animal husbandry and stuff like that, we utilize it to our advantage because we understand it, but we didn't always understand it. And the idea that we're using it to an advantage is, I think, using it for design, for example. When we're designing dogs for different jobs or for different pets, or we're designing, farm animals for different, purposes or uses, hens that will lay more eggs, or, larger breasts, or
corn that will produce more kernels.
Yeah, we do design things and use it and direct it, but I don't see that in nature. In nature, that doesn't seem to happen. It seems that we can get a hold of it and do it. It seems like in nature, just whatever survives best, and that's what goes on into the future. I don't think I'm not following the evidence. I just don't think that there is evidence of a purpose. I don't see it. But if you think that you see or you have the idea that there is this purpose, I would suggest finding that evidence. I would say that's a fair thing to go and look into if you think that it's there. But I don't think that just arguing that things are what they are necessarily points to they're supposed to be that way.
Right.
If somebody dies in an accident, I don't think they were supposed to die in an accident. I think they did. But I don't think that there's anything that shows me that they were supposed to, that was supposed to happen, just because it happened.
Okay, and actually, just one last thing to wrap it up. So based on, I know that it's very important that, I feel like the whole evolutionary theory is contingent upon the Earth being millions of years old, right? Or at least millions.
It's got to be pretty old, yeah. It takes a while, yeah, sometimes.
Got to be pretty old.
Sure.
But I've learned recently that, the way that we when we do carbon dating, we find out how old these things are. We look at, I don't know, like they just recently dug up some like sarcophagus in Egypt or stuff. They study the materials around, or maybe not to that, but I think for things that are millions of years old, they have to study.
Here's the thing, though. We have more than just dating methods that point to the age of the universe, okay, and the age of the planet. So we have geology, we have cosmology. There are many different sciences that rely on age of the Earth being what it is, and that have different bodies of evidence that all converge on this date. So this is not just about someone carbon dates. This is about tons of evidence in different fields of study that say this is how old these things are. And if you are reading something that's saying, hey, that's not the case because carbon dating, I would say expand, and I'm not telling you to go to any kind of biased sites or sites that you think are attacking religion or anything, but just go to strictly science sites, where they don't have they got no dog in the fight. It's not, most scientists are theists. So I would say trust what they're telling you and go in there and just look at what does it say, what do astronomers say about the age of the Earth? What do physicists dealing with astrophysics say about the age of the universe? And what do geologists say about the age of the Earth and why, right? And I think that if you look into the different fields of study that have to do with how old the Earth is and how old the universe is, you'll find that there is a lot of agreement. For different reasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was kind of my issue. The fact that I know you said like there's like 10 different things that converge and back up the theory that the world or the Earth is millions of years old, if not billions. But just the fact that for a few things, carbon dating measures or dates the material around the thing that we're studying. We study like the age of the meteorites on the Earth. Right, we don't actually study the Earth itself, and in geology we study layers. We see that there's sedimentary rock, and then there's like another layer of a different type of material, and we assume, we do the math, and it must have taken 200,000 years for this layer by itself, but we don't actually.
Right, but where do you go? You go where the evidence leads, right? So you look at what you know, and you extrapolate from what you know, and until you find, it's like you have to use what you know. You can't use what you don't know. Right? We can't build theories on the age of the Earth based on information we don't have. If we have information on how long it takes for a certain process to happen, and then we see that this process has happened and this is what we're looking at, and so this is how long we estimate it would have had to take. And we also understand that perhaps there are certain things and functions that can affect that process, like tree rings, for example, right? Different types of weather and different types of environmental factors can affect the size of the tree ring. They're not the same every year. They change depending on the environment. But you still have a situation where even though you understand that this can change, you also get that you have like an annual ring. You get, so there are certain things that are, like in tree rings are a great example because you can actually look at ancient events in those rings, right, and see where there was, for example, volcanic eruptions or where there was droughts or floods or things like that, and see that in a tree ring. So you can understand that things can impact it and still come up with estimates. Right? It doesn't, and there are different dating methods. Carbon dating is not the only type of dating or way of dating, and
radioactive methods.
But I just think that when you're talking about where the evidence leads, I don't think that I'm missing the boat on that. I think that I am following what is the current understanding of things. I personally make no claims as to the age of the Earth or whatnot. I do know that I can see evolution at work. It's something that we can observe and even control to our benefit. So I don't have any problem with evolution, and I also know that it's the only mechanism that I've seen that can naturally occur to produce these results. Now, does that mean that if somebody felt that there was a different mechanism at work, and they wanted to go and study and research that, I have no objection. I think that's fine. And if they come up with something great, we have more information.
Right, we'll learn something new.
But at this point, we don't have that information.
Okay, I guess I'll leave you with a question. Don't you feel that science has more to lose than to gain from finding out that everything we've done or everything we've learned about is completely wrong?
No, because we've done that before, right?
Right.
We've had those sorts of renaissances in science where evolution was such a renaissance, right? And Big Bang was such a renaissance. And
Sure, even the age of...
look at relativity. That was like a big change in things. And so, when a scientist comes up with a theory and can demonstrate that theory and show that a huge body of prior work was incorrect or incomplete or needs to be adjusted to a brand new model, that person goes down in history.
Right.
I don't think they have much to lose. I think that whoever does it gets a Nobel Prize, right?
Even like the tectonic plates, because of course, back before it was discovered that these things actually have shifted over time, people thought that things were static. It's land. Like, how's this thing going to move?
Yeah.
But then, someone comes along and proposes that, hey, this one kind of fits here. And so those hypotheses started building, and then the evidence begins, like the hunting for evidence.
So to me, I'm not trying to. Don't get me wrong. This is not a dig at you or anything, Chris. But it kind of reminds me a little bit of like when you have the UFO theorists, and they're like, oh, scientists want to cover up the fact that there's alien life, and it's like, are you kidding me? A scientist would go nuts if they could demonstrate alien life. And I think that's the thing. If there's a huge breakthrough that could be made, or some brand new thing that would flip science on its head and create an entire new field or body of study, or make the current bodies of study change their direction, that's huge. And I think any scientist would be excited to be involved in an endeavor like that.
I'm not even in the sciences, and I would be excited to see something like that. It would be incredible.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to imply that it was like some cover, but I guess just again, two recent things that have happened is, the fact that, this sarcophagus was discovered in Egypt, and, the guy that's leading the expedition is like this guy named Zahi Hawass, and he's been known to like, kind of just like when people want to debate him in public and talk about the actual date of Egypt, like he tries to push him off, or like he has it done in like a specific area where his people and like...
Are you talking about Egyptology?
Yeah, I feel like
that's a little sketchy sometimes. I think. I'm not like expert on it, but I have, I've heard those things too. That there are, you do get. I'm not going to lie. You do get some people who really dig into their research and don't want to back out. You can get individual scientists and even groups who don't want to see change. There are a lot of people that are averse to it, but at the same time. You're going to get people that are unethical, people that will even sometimes fudge data, right? Look at the guy that did the anti-vax studies and still to this day won't retract his, even though he was nailed falsifying data, and he still won't back down, and he's still misleading people. And so, yes, you can find unethical people and sometimes groups that will stick to something despite the fact that it's not good science. You're right, that does happen.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that was just my main concern is that, because that's going on right now, I kind of thought it might be a nice discussion.
But you know what exposes and fixes it? More science, right? Better science.
Okay, I appreciate the time, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So much.
All right, so that was Chris in Hollywood. That was a good call. And now we've got Ram in New Delhi, India, who says religious experiences. He wants to talk about his religious experiences in India. And Ram, you're on with Tracie and Phil. And before you get started, I just wanted to ask, because we don't really do calls that are pure testimonials. So is there a purpose to talking about these experiences?
Yeah.
Okay, can you share that?
Sure. It's about, 3 years ago, I had a religious experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically discovered consciousness in what people say when they call meditation and all that thing. So I started to meditate, and I really thought about the fact that maybe this whole thing is not existing. Matlab, this is assimilation.
What do you mean this whole thing is not existing?
I mean, we are a simulation. We are a simulation.
I'm
Like-
not sure I follow.
Like the reality around you is a simulation, like everything that you're
Oh, we are
experiencing?
a simulation. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So that's the idea that came into my mind when I was meditating
Okay.
over and over again. And one day I just fainted, and before that I was really manic. Before that I was really manic about
Life in the simulation? No, I mean, so
Yeah.
you were, seriously? Because I was just, kind of being a little facetious there. But so the simulation idea was kind of freaking you out a little.
yes.
Okay.
it was.
Okay.
And then I fainted, and then I was really confused about what's happening. So I was thinking very weird things, that God is making me do this. There is a test in all this, and I have somehow failed or somehow passed, and the world is ending for me. I am the only, because when you experience life through your lens, and you don't experience life through other people's lenses. You just imagine that they are just like your lens,
Sure.
right?
Yes.
But
Hello?
Okay.
your lens is fundamental. Your lens is fundamental. It
Sure.
is the only experience. It is the only whole that you're receiving information from.
Sure.
So to assume that other people are existing out there is a bit of a leap, if you can say, because you can't experience what they're experiencing.
Okay. Do you got anything else, or was that it? Because I mean, I would tend to agree with you that we basically have this foundational reality that we call the consensus.
Have you ever meditated?
Yes.
So what is that experience? Do you experience things more differently than you did before?
It doesn't affect me so much when I come out of it. It affects me when I'm in it, right? So when I do it, I have a lot of weird experiences, but when I come out of it, it's almost like when I wake up from a dream.
Because I have experienced a complete difference in the amount of efficiency that I have.
Okay, I've had some experiences, let's just say on some illicit substances, where I have carried things that I was able to do that I couldn't do when I wasn't doing that. Like, let's just make it straightforward. I have been unable to do things, taken drugs, been able to do them, and then been able to do them after. So I have had that experience with drugs. You have had that experience with meditation.
Well, I have that experience with drugs too.
Okay.
But
So I'm with you. But I mean, what is it that, what is the purpose of the call here today?
so you and Matt, you fundamentally believe in a very materialistic world, right?
Sure, yeah.
The materialistic sense of it. You don't acknowledge the spiritualistic sense of it at all.
Correct.
Now, what
Now,
you are
I say
doing
correct.
right now-
I can't really speak for Matt. I think he would say that that's correct, but I'm speaking for myself. I should clarify. That is correct for me.
And yes, and that's correct for Matt also, and that's correct for everyone who is like a hardcore atheist. And
Well,
Not
no,
necessarily, yeah,
No,
that's-
I've met atheists who believe, for example, in souls, and atheists who believe in ghosts. They just don't believe in gods.
Or even like spiritual
Oh.
connections and that type of.
But I would agree with you that most atheists would probably reject that, and I'm perfectly happy talking about my views.
Okay. So now, you are also part of something, like you're a community of atheists.
Sure. Yes.
So a community is doing something greater than yourself.
The community does things.
Say it again?
community is something which is basically you do greater than yourself. You are a singular person.
Right, interdependency is what that's called, right? So you have people that are dependent and then they grow to be independent. Usually, sometimes there's things that affect that, but in general, most people will become independent, and then you can become either codependent or interdependent. And interdependent would be when you come together with other people to achieve more than you can achieve by yourself.
Yeah. And so that's sort of a brotherhood that you, sorry, it's a wrong word.
No, I
but
understand.
that's like
It's cool. I understand what you were trying to convey.
it's sort of a brotherhood of people doing things that they believe in, right? And that is what spirituality is.
That's what you're saying that you would call spirituality, but I don't see what's non-materialistic about that.
Sure.
I mean, a person living and a person dead have the same amount of atoms.
But they're not working the same way. A lamp that lights and a lamp that doesn't light have the same amount of atoms.
No.
No?
No.
Why do you say no?
Because a lamp that doesn't work, the tungsten of the lamp would be destroyed, so there won't be that, it won't work that properly. So there would be some.
What if the
fault
cord
in
just
lamp.
isn't working right? What if there's a short in the cord?
But it still has the same amount of atoms total. It's just a short.
It's just a short. But there would be a difference, right? It's a short, right?
Yeah, and there's a difference between a
but
live
in a-
body and a dead body, which is that the
No.
components... Well, yes. What do you mean, no? The components are no longer functioning. They have,
So
something is given out.
This is the major argument here, right? So the argument is that there is something, I mean, the duality is there.
No, you're saying that, but I'm saying no. I'm saying I don't see it. If a car runs and another car doesn't run, right, or the car doesn't run tomorrow, like I had a battery that died, you gonna tell me that there's some major difference in like that the car had a spirit in it the day before? I get out and go to start it, it needs a new battery. The battery's dead, it failed to function, and now the car doesn't run anymore. I go put a new battery in it, now the car runs. Did I go buy a new soul for my car?
Well, I'll tell you something.
Sell those at Walmart.
That after meditating, I found myself to be hooked on to some like 10 car batteries. I really understood what it is to be alive. Before that, I was questioning things. After that, I, understood why things are the way they are.
Well, I'm glad that you had a great experience from meditation. I'm not sure that the answers that you got are actually correct, but you got something that satisfied you, and I understand that from what you're saying.
And you didn't get that.
No, I felt like I was floating above my bed, and I really don't believe I was floating above my bed. I think it was just the experience. Like I said, a dream. Things happen to me in dreams too that are really awesome sometimes and bizarre or terrifying. But I don't think they're actually happening or that they have bearing. You can do things with your brain.
And you said that your efficiency didn't improve.
Not from meditation, but it had. Like again, I will acknowledge that it did from drugs.
But my efficiency improved with the meditation.
That's
also.
fine.
Okay.
And I'm okay with that. I've had that experience with drugs. I understand.
Correctly, I'm using it correctly, if I could say that, or would it not?
No, I think that what you're saying is fine. I'm not doubting that somebody could achieve through meditation what I achieved through drugs. I'm not saying that they can't.
Okay.
I think you're saying, like, just why is it significant? I guess that you achieved it through meditation. Was that, like, I don't know, is that any more significant than you getting it through drugs? I don't know if it made a difference, but.
But that experience can happen. Yes, you can gain, you can gain some kind of weird capacities, and then realize after you come down off of that meditation or the drug or whatever, and still understand how to do that. And it's kind of amazing. I agree. It's like, wow, that was super cool. But now I can build a 3-story card house. I couldn't before. I don't know that there's that it's going to make me rich, but I can do it.
What I think is that man is dead without spirituality.
Well, I know you're saying you think
He needs
that.
something to guide himself. He needs something to guide himself.
Before you said spirituality was just what people coming together in the community to
but
do.
I'm going to say I feel a bit like we're dealing with a testimonial here. This is a testimonial, and we really don't do testimonials, Ram. I mean, if you want to call and talk about how, why you believe a thing, but if you just want to say, I meditated and now...
Have you ever heard of Osho?
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 I don't think so.
No.
Okay. So you can, he was a spiritual guru in the 70s who came to the US, and there's a Netflix special on him. You can search, you can do some net. It's called Wild Wild Country.
Okay.
Free published. It's a show about how this guru, he influenced his people to new heights of basically achieving life, living life more fully.
Okay.
All right.
So that's it. That's all the show is about, and it's also about how the underlings of him were corrupt and all those things that happened. So that always happens sometimes, I guess.
Okay, I'm not sure how that...
All right. I'm going to say that we need to cut this call because I think what we're dealing with here is a testimonial. And we don't really do testimonials. I would encourage you to look up testimonials and get an idea of what that is, because it's generally...
Okay, I don't... I
Thank you, Ram. We're moving to Robert in Dallas. And you're a former Jehovah's Witness who needs help moving forward. You're on with Tracie and Phil.
Hey guys, happy Sunday. Loving the show so far. Well,
Hey.
the last call, but loving the show.
Rude.
I was raised in the Jehovah's Witness cult. My mom was sucked into it basically after the murder of my father. She was a widow raising 2 kids and got sucked into it. And it wasn't until I was older, I was grown and had more responsibilities, that I was able to break free of my cognitive dissonance. Just kind of looking at what was going on, learning about the 2 witness rule. And I had a friend who refused a blood transfusion, a dear friend of mine who passed away, never leaving the hospital after giving birth to her one and only child. And coming to grips with it, but also being in the bubble of a high control cult like that, it was really tough just breaking free from it. And I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the 2 witness rule and how that applies within the Jehovah's Witness cult, but simply put, in trying to not be like the last call and just try to speed up things, basically, it was with the Mosaic Law when Moses said that by the word of 2 or more witnesses, something could be established. So basically, pedophiles have found a way to just exploit that within this worldwide organization. They would assault someone sexually, and because they do it in private, it would be that word against the other person. And so they can just move about the country doing these things. And I found out that within my congregation was a registered sex offender. He had been with us. He had been assigned to my little group in which I would assign him to work with the kids. He would be in my home. I would always go to his home to cut his hair. And he was just sharing something with me one day, and it wasn't making sense to me. He was complaining about not being able to do a certain thing. And he just basically broke down and told me, well, it may just be because I'm a registered sex offender. And at that point, I just knew that this was a cult that I needed to run away from. So I kind of just want to get to the post leaving the cult. I have found that the resources that exist when you leave something like that, other than just knowing you're not alone, it seems that within therapy, there's a lack right now of true resources for cult recovery. And I just wanted to, see what would you recommend for someone who is really trying to deal with the anger of having wasted so many years and the realities of that, but also trying to just assimilate to regular life. I emerged in my early 30s having never celebrated anyone's birthday, not even knowing how to mourn death properly, so that when coworkers would experience things, I felt just weird and just standing out even more so, because I already didn't have family in my life any longer. Lifelong friends weren't around. I think that probably would be a very suspect dating profile, that I have no one at all to do that with that. No friends, no family, no one talked to me. Hi, I'd like to get to know you. I'd back away from someone like that. But anyway, what kind of advice would you give someone just really wanting to deal with the anger that kind of wells up from having lived in that type of cult?
I'm going to let Phil handle this call predominantly because he's more the people person. But I do want to say, before I let him go, that there are a number of forums that are designed specifically for Jehovah's Witnesses that you can find online. So XJWs have support groups online, and I totally encourage you to go and find them if you haven't. It's not a hard thing to find. They are very prominent when you Google.
Yeah, you bringing that up brings up the next point, and just that I am a part of those, but it's one of those things where I find that we are all so hurt that we can only do so much for each other, because we are all in the same boat. And so it's all of us out, in the water trying to just keep our heads above water, not really knowing how do you go about picking up the pieces with all of these things being the new reality in life.
Yeah, I would also suggest Recovering from Religion, which is, if I'm not mistaken, still Daryl Ray's organization there, that they have the Hotline Project where you can call in and speak to trained operators about your experiences, and it's a wide variety of calls that they take, a lot of different issues that come to pass, but some of them are just people trying to acclimate to life post their religion and trying to understand, what that means for them and their family interactions and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of support that you can get through that meeting. So I would suggest, I think it's rfr.org, but just search Recovering from Religion and check out the Hotline Project there, because that may be a good resource for you to actually reach out and talk to somebody that's not necessarily within that XJW world, but can kind of talk about the experiences that other people have gone through and kind of talk with you so you can better understand kind of where you are and where you're what may be a good path for you moving forward. Like there's a lot of resource that's out there through that medium. So I would definitely suggest Recovering from Religion.
Yeah, and I think they also host the Secular Therapy Project through Recovering from Religion.
I'm not
I
sure.
thank you guys very, very much. I will certainly look into it. I really appreciate it, guys.
It has been confirmed that yes, it is.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for your call. And, hey, I've been asked to go ahead and put you on hold so that they can get some information and maybe, get with you further on this. Okay?
Good, thank you.
So let me put you back on hold.
Yeah, so good luck to you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was a good call. And then we've got Logan in Iowa who wants to talk about the intelligent design argument and how to refute it. So, Logan, you're on with Tracie and Phil.
Hey, guys. How you guys doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
Well.
I'm pretty good. So I just wanted to bring up a time that I had when I was in a little more of, I was a little more open to a lot of more options. And I didn't really grow up in a religious household, but my grandparents were, and I just saw it a lot. And I kind of felt like the Jewish kid when he hears all the people talking about Santa Claus and his parents have already told him that, that's not real. And he has to just kind of keep his mouth shut about it, not ruin it for them. I kind of felt like that, but I had a lot of people coming at me trying to convince me. And I want to bring up the argument I heard that stumped me as a kid. And while it's not as daunting now, I just want some closure on that and have you guys take a look at it.
All right.
So I was told, how can you look at all this and not think that someone did this? And then they said, think about it like this. If a tornado went through a junkyard, what do you think the likelihood would be that it just put a car together and the car could run? What do you think the likelihood of that is? And yeah.
Okay. And this argument, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, now I can look at it and be like, that's kind of you can't really compare a non-biological sort of creation to a biological one. Doesn't really equate equally. But as a kid, I didn't really.
Right. I mean, the main difference between these things is something we discussed with a prior caller, which is that naturally occurring functions are actually the opposite of what we're talking about when we're talking about design, right? So when we talk about a car being designed, we understand even the whole history of who started, car manufacture, from the combustion engines. Maybe we don't know who invented the wheel, but ultimately, all these components came together to make a car. We saw them, we saw mass manufacture and sale of these things, promotion. We honor the man who did it in the United States, Henry Ford. And we have different car competitors. We know a lot about cars. And we understand why cars are produced. The problem with a human being is that you have none of that, right? There is nothing, and it's not just with a human being. You could just as easily say a rock, and it's the same problem. Where did this rock come from? Is this rock designed? Did someone make this rock for some purpose? Is one of the moons of Jupiter designed? Are all of them designed? The problem is, what does a moon of Jupiter, what is its purpose? What was the function? Where's the blueprint for the Jupiter moon? Where's the blueprint for the human being, right? And so, one of the callers was pointing to DNA, and yet you would need the blueprint for the DNA, right? Because if you're saying that is the mechanism, I'm saying, where is your demonstration for the whole history of this thing that shows the purpose and shows the production and and it can be a historical thing where you're going back and looking at it. But there's none of that. It's just like you have this thing, you have very little history on it. We have a naturalistic, sort of materialistic history, which somebody pointed out earlier, that that we don't have the spiritual history. We don't have that dual history of here's how the spirituality developed, and here's how the creation and the God was involved, and here's examples of how creation works, and here's how we use creation today in order to do artificial breeding. There is just simply nothing that we have to demonstrate a creation model.
Yeah, even when getting that type of question, because that's happened before with me in a few conversations that I've had, but I kind of look at it like this to say okay, well, what you're saying that this universe was designed. Okay, well, what would an undesigned universe look like? What can we start pointing to? And as you start going through, whatever they come up with, if they come up with anything, we have no other comparisons of other universe, one that's designed versus one that is undesigned. Can we actually tell a difference between those two concepts if we only have a data point of one to actually look at, which is the universe that we find ourselves in and interacting with? And so I think for those questions, it can be tough depending on who you're talking with and how honest they're willing to be as far as, can you actually define what makes this universe divine versus what would you look for something that's an undesigned thing within the universe, and it's a very interesting question, and you can kind of go back and forth on that side and get them to understand and realize that they can't differentiate really because, we only have a data set of one. To actually do that versus when we look at cars or 747s or tornadoes and what they actually do when they go through. Sometimes we have all of these things to compare and contrast. And
what if the tornado went through the trailer park and I was standing there stunned and saying, holy cow, look at how the debris piled so perfectly. Look at how the roof collapsed in just that way. What are the odds that it would collapse just as it did, as opposed to collapsing a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, and then it wouldn't be collapsed as it is, right? What are the odds that the debris that we're looking at post-tornado would be exactly in the positioning that it's in, as opposed to some other positioning? And if I told you that to me that was very meaningful, and that I saw this as evidence of design, what do you even say to that? I mean, if I believe that everything is designed, then isn't what the tornado left behind also designed?
Oh, thank you so much for that. That is, it has been too many years since I've heard something as just well put together as that. I've had to listen to that argument go back and forth in my head for so long. And, no, he probably would say that, well, in that instance, God wanted to design that tornado.
Yeah, and then he wanted to design the debris in just the way the debris was, and that it was all in God's hands, right? So the whole,
Right.
I
How
think
do you draw that distinction?
we've described it before. I know I've heard Matt describe it this way, and I'm not sure, and I think I used it in a talk one time that, basically when they use that watchmaker argument, it's sometimes called, right? Like that it's like making a watch from, just a watch just appears in nature or something. And the point is, what they're trying to say is that there's nothing to contrast the watch with that would make it meaningful or significant, because the entire universe is watches. It's all watches. So what is meaningful about design if everything is design? Then how do you recognize design when you have, like what Phil was saying, when you have nothing to compare it to? What is the undesigned thing
Right.
that we can then look at? It's like if that's, we tend to look at the things that human beings make, or that we understand that other animals manipulate in order to build a structure or something that serves. And for me, you have to have that contrast, and almost always the contrast is nature, something in nature. Like your friend, the tornado. He uses a tornado as the contrast to design. And it's like, how ironic that he's using nature as a demonstration of the design of nature to show that it's not, the tornado's not designed, the debris that it left behind was not designed. Like, what is that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. It was, all right, well, thank you so much for just, ripping that apart for me. I really needed that.
Okay.
I've been a big fan of the show for a while now, and you guys have really helped me find my footing in this argument. I finally understood what agnosticism really meant in the grand scheme of all these different options, and this show's just really helped me out, and I appreciate it all.
All right.
And so yeah.
Well, thanks very much for your call, Logan. All right, we're going to let you go, and we're moving on to Andrew in New York, who is, if I'm understanding this correctly, an atheist who leans a little bit conservative, and I guess you want to talk a little bit about that, Andrew? This is Tracie and Phil.
Hi, yeah.
Hi.
Oh, you hear me?
Yeah, you sound great.
All right.
Hello? We did hear
I'm about to say
you.
you do not sound great currently.
Then it dropped. It looks like the line is still open.
It is. Andrew, are you still there at all, or? Oh, dear.
We'll give the control room a minute to see if we can save that call.
Oh, wow. Sure, maybe he's on the mobile phone and lost the connection.
I
or
haven't
something.
gotten word from the control room that we should drop it. Okay, so we're gonna leave that line alone, and they're gonna work on that, and then I'm gonna move on to, we're gonna go to David Branson in Missouri, who wants to talk about the uniqueness of humans and why he believes that is evidence for God. Hi, David, you're on with Tracie and Phil.
Hi there, you guys can hear me all right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a college graduate, and I took a ministries minor, studied the Bible quite a bit. Just to let you guys know, actually, I was aware of you guys quite a while ago. I'm a former atheist going into college, and then I gave my life to Christ not too long ago, 2 years ago approximately.
Okay.
So I'm just going to point out a little bit of scripture. I know you guys, I've seen some of your shows, you sometimes get thrown off of scripture, but it on the theological standpoint, that is our main defense, you know what I mean? The Word of God.
No, I don't really know what you mean by that, but if this ties into the uniqueness of humans and why you think that's evidence of God, then feel free to quote scripture.
Yeah. We see God's word as a living word of God, and
right, but it holds no weight here. So if you're going to use it for evidence, using it here is a useless endeavor.
Yeah, that's what I've seen in other shows.
Okay.
Pretty sad, actually.
But you're going to do it anyway.
I'm not. I'm just going to quote some scriptures, say, wait.
Oh, okay.
Point this out. Yeah.
So
Genesis, we know that Genesis was written a very long time ago. Actually, historians and theologians agree it's one of the first books that were published in writing, and it's probably about, I could say, good 3,500 years ago, or the early 1450 BC to 1400 BC. And
yeah, that makes it more than 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I said about 3,500 or 3,400. Pretty long time ago.
Yeah, we got you. Go for it. Go.
So in Genesis, the writer talks about what's God saying to creation, and this one is, I believe he's actually just speaking in general to the heavenly people or the heavenly angels, you say. He says, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So what's kind of unique, just this one scripture, if you hear me out. The likeness that he's talking about, first of all, is the likeness of his people or God. And you would see God in the angels, and they are creators as well. But mostly here is let them have dominion. Now, this is way, very long time ago. Mankind had not fully, taken over the world, if you know what I mean.
Wait a minute, though. Wait a minute. The authors, right, the people that are described in Genesis definitely had a handle on animal husbandry. Definitely.
Animal what?
Animal husbandry. They were raising and rearing and breeding animals for sale, profit, food. So they did have control of animals, the people that are responsible for writing the book of Genesis. It's about them, and they are herders. They had subdued animals, the people that wrote the book.
Yeah, I can understand that, but it says over all creatures of the earth and every creeping thing.
We have that in dominion over all now?
No.
But, I'm just saying, last 100 years, mankind has trained more animals than we possibly imagined. I mean, I just saw a documentary the other day.
Yes, and I think it makes sense that ancient people observed that human beings had this capacity to control other species. They could, we can. It's an observable fact. It's not. There's nothing unique, or there's nothing. What's the word I'm looking for? That would require more than just understanding what you had accomplished in order to.
So that's just something we can agree that's unique about humans, and right?
No, I don't think it's unique about humans. I didn't say it was unique about humans. Other species also can control other species to some degree, right? We have relationships that are symbiotic. There's like ants that do this thing with other insects. I'm sure there's other, examples that other people are probably going to be emailing us and hitting the blog about.
Cacophony.
But the point is, I didn't say that it was unique to humans. I said that I agree that humans do it, and it's an observable fact. It's almost like if you would quoted a scripture saying the sun rises. Okay. Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So I was going to say other things, about being fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and
people breed. That's a fact too, but it's an observable fact. I mean, these are not things that require revelation.
Yeah, they don't exactly, but
they don't at all.
Yeah. I just saying that for ancient writers, so that's pretty.
No, that's pretty observable. When you're talking about people who had pretty much learned that they can breed animals and domesticate animals, I mean, they've got a handle on how they can control things. They can, they worked with other societies like Egypt that could irrigate, right? That had agriculture. I mean, they pretty much were surrounded in an area where there was a lot of control and a lot of manipulation of the natural world. And we still do this today, right? And so the idea, though, that I would say that with human beings, I would probably agree that there's a uniqueness of degree.
Okay.
That we as a degree are highly capable of doing this, but I don't think that the Bible is inspired in that it said this. I think it's just simply something that anybody could look at and say, hey, this is the thing about people, right? They manipulate their environment to a huge degree.
A pretty huge degree, and it's pretty neat. I'm actually a big animal lover, so it's kind of neat how we can train so many animals. But I just saw that as, it did point that out, in the early scriptures, and it kind of hit me. I'm like,
Yeah,
wow,
they basically were saying, hey, look what we do.
Yeah, all right. So another thing is how humans have different faiths. I studied also world religions.
Sure.
There's quite, and it boggled me how many beliefs are out there. Hinduism and all the amazing beliefs that so many people are hooked on. We can agree on that, right?
People have a lot of beliefs. Sure do.
Yeah. What's interesting though, hear me on here. I can't give specific examples at the time. I don't have any research in front of me, but
I think there's
different cultures believed in some kind of higher power. You look at the Aztecs and also the Mesopotamians and Egyptians. They believed in some kind of higher power, right? Like some kind of higher spiritual guides. Often it was in the form of an animal, like even the Aztecs had like a half animal, half human, just like the Egyptians. They had the bird guy or whatever, half bird, half
like
man.
The horse.
And it's just kind of bizarre. It's really bizarre beliefs. I mean, I think anybody on the outside coming to you was like, wow, they really believe in that. Like, that's really interesting.
Well, they might think the same about yours, but continue.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting, though, that these two cultures existed completely opposite sides of the planet. You know what I mean? They had no connection. There was no
Wait a minute. Are we talking about naturalistic religions that incorporate like animals and
or the fact that religions cropped up on two different planes for people that didn't interact.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it makes sense how they were completely different from
opposite.
Yeah, I mean, people are prone toward assigning agency to things, right?
Yeah.
Even as a method of explanation, if there's not one that they can see right offhand, well, this God did it, so let's sacrifice.
The less control a person has over their situation, the more likely they are to start anthropomorphizing it, right? Like giving it attributes of will and things like that. I remember one study where they gave people a game to play, and the language that they use, the researchers could manipulate the game, but the people that were the subjects didn't know this. And so they were instructed to do this puzzle that was like trying to get these metal balls into these holes. But at some points, the researchers manipulated the balls so that they wouldn't go into the holes. That frustrated the subjects because they couldn't get the game to work like it should work. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. When the game worked as they expected it to work, when they were able to control it based on their understanding of how the balls should be rolling and tilting the table and whatnot, everything was fine. When they started to get frustrated about the balls not doing what they were supposed to do, they started saying things about the balls that were sort of indication of will, like they're just not behaving themselves, like these balls are not doing, they're not. And so there were these weird things, like people were using language that gave attribution to the mechanism, right, that was endowing it with like the idea that it was doing this on purpose somehow to frustrate them. We see this in children a lot, right? So children tend to anthropomorphize things, and most of the time, I think most people outgrow that, right? Like most of us kind of outgrow it. We start to learn that. But when you don't know much about the world around you, right? When the world around you is big and scary, and you don't know what lightning is or how that cloud is producing lightning,
volcanoes,
then it makes sense that you're going to say, "Hey, this is the angry gods," because that's what people do when they don't understand a thing or can't control a thing, or they start saying that maybe we can control it if we understand that it's got some will behind it, right? Because then I can make sacrifices, and then the gods won't set my house on fire with lightning again.
I can actually do something.
Yeah, it gives us a sense that we can manipulate this thing in a magical way.
I couldn't imagine something like the ground shaking for the first time, but it's never done that before. Like, what would you even think if this had never
there are some reports
occurred?
of chimpanzees like using threatening posturing toward thunderstorms.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, I mean, it's this, chase it away. It's scary. It's scary. Well, I mean, but if you're an animal and you get scared by that, it'd almost be like if you had a dog that instead of running and hiding under the bed, it was barking at the window, like it would get angry and bark at the storm. It's just that sort of confusion about agency. And I'm sorry, I was saying attribution before, but agency is the word I was searching for. Applying agency to non-agents.
A question for you then. So we're talking about, agency and how humans are obviously giving this agency to create religions, and obviously for the Egyptians and the Aztecs were they're kind of bizarre, these half human, half animal creatures that they worship. Egyptians had probably like 160 something gods. Pretty much every animal they knew or was important, they used to idolize a god. And there is that, once again, don't freak out now. There is the scripture in Romans 1:29 where it says that they changed the truth of God into a lie and worshipped and served the creature more than the creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. So the creature is another word, or words that associate with the creature are things that are created, or as we see in theology, things that are created by God, which is just any animal or object, the sun, the moon, the heavenly bodies, for example. And you see that a lot in other religions. They kind of worship or give over acknowledgement to these created things more than the living God.
Well, except that they don't see it that way, right? They see it the other way around. They would say that you're worshiping a false God and they're worshiping the true God.
And things that they can actually interact with in the first place, but
right.
Toss that aside.
So my question to you, you guys, are you slightly evolutionist atheists or evolutionary?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say for me. I mean, as long as artificial breeding, as long as we can breed animals.
Artificial selection.
Yeah, if there's artificial selection, I can't deny evolution.
Oh, yeah. So when you talk about humans giving agency to create these gods in religion, then why in the evolutionary stage? First of all, you did a good job kind of explaining why, and that's fair. So given that argument that we had to do it to, explain the things around us that we couldn't control, then why are humans specifically, as far as I know, we're the only creatures or animals that have religions and worship gods? I mean, there hasn't been much evidence to show any animals, as far as I know.
That's a good question. It would be a great question to pursue. I think it should be, it probably has been an area of speculation and study in anthropology. And I think that there's psychology that also has gone down that road. I know that Jung, as far back as Jung, before we even had neuropsychology, was positing theories of why we do this. He thought that the internal dialogue was what gave people the impression of God. And so there's all kinds of ideas about, what it is about human beings specifically, the high level of self-awareness and knowing that we're thinking when we're not aware we're thinking can give people the impression that the thoughts come from somewhere else or that someone is guiding those thoughts besides us.
Consciousness in general. I read an article about language and the development of language, and it's actually really interesting. And this is when I was an atheist, and this was like my big backing, because the majority of my friends were believers and in college. And so I'm like, well, guess what? Language developed, and soon eventually religions developed along with it because of the consciousness or whatever. We were aware of some kind of consciousness, but it's really just our own development. You know what I mean?
Sure. But yeah, I mean, what you're asking, I think, is a good question that many people have posited answers for. People are free to go out and look up the research that has been done on that and decide whether they feel that any or all, or some or group of those things is a fair response, or whether more research needs to be done, which I would encourage. I think that it's a worthy question and a worthy effort.
Yeah, I mean, I have an answer to that question, but you wouldn't like it. Is
it that I wouldn't like it, or I wouldn't believe it?
I probably wouldn't believe it because it's scriptural, but it's pretty clear that we're fallen creatures.
I don't think that's clear at all, because that would assume that there was a time when we were different than we are in a way that was somehow better.
We were we were a pretty good state, I would say, before the fall.
We don't know this.
Based on what?
Now, wait a minute. Now you're just making assertions, and you don't get to do that.
In the theological belief.
I understand the theology, but you said it's pretty clear that we're a fallen creature, and that's not pretty clear. That's what your Bible says, and that's fine that, your Bible has this story in it that it has this whole Adam and Eve thing, and if you want to believe that, you can, but if you're going to call this show, you don't just assert it, you have to back it up.
Oh, I understand.
Do you?
Well, I do have some arguments. For example, why are humans so violent towards each other?
Why is any animal violent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
more than other. We have entire wars, and
Yeah, and there's other animals that, I mean, they certainly don't have populations as large as ours because our population, wait a minute, our populations are bolstered by things like agriculture, right? Which other animals have not done in the way that we have done that. So when we have the ability to produce a culture that is 1 million strong or more, it's millions strong or even 1 billion strong, the wars are going to be huge. But other animals also have territorial disputes where they will fight to the death between the packs, and some of them are large packs for those species, right? I mean, go watch Meerkat Manor for some, like really violence.
Chimpanzees.
I say I'm an animal lover. I hate seeing animals kill each other.
Right, but I'm just saying that, sometimes they'll have packs of like 20, each, and they're just tearing each other to shreds. And now, and if they could be 1 million strong, they might be 1 million meerkats going at another 1 million meerkats tearing each other to shreds.
Each other in our words, though, as well, if you can understand what I'm saying, especially if you look at like the current state of our country and the division of, the politics or whatever. And it's kind of sad to see that people are tearing each other up so much for no reason at all. Some people are like, I knew a friend just recently, he said that online somebody told him to commit suicide. I'm just like, wow, that's pretty dark, Well, what is it in us that causes that? Okay. My only explanation is.
I mean, people could be assholes, but that doesn't indicate that there was a time where people weren't.
This call is a little bit meandering, and I think maybe for a future call, narrow down the topic and try again. And I think that'll probably do it then.
Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for calling.
That's what Aaliyah says. Dust yourself off and try again.
They told me that they have Andrew back, so we're going to go and try. This is Andrew in New York, who says that he leans a little bit conservative and that he is an atheist, and he wanted to call and chat about that today. You're on with Tracie and Phil.
Hi, sorry about that before. What did you hear from me? I don't know what you heard.
We didn't hear much. We heard you say, "How do I sound?" and we were like, "Great," and then you just dropped.
And then that was it.
Oh, good, because I was spouting stuff, and apparently I accidentally hit the hold button.
Okay, well, you're back on now. So what's on? What is it you've got today about being a conservative atheist?
Okay, so I have an issue in general with wanting to be on the side of atheists. Because I find that atheists generally tend to lean left-leaning politically, and I find that is a more immoral stance than the right-leaning.
Okay, so the left values offend your sense of morality, and you find that this is an impediment to your capacity to support the community as a whole. Is that what you're saying?
Right. I don't find that there's much right-leaning atheists out there in general.
Okay. I think you're probably correct. What about, is it possible to support atheism in the sense of maybe separation of church and state issues? Would you stand with the left on that? You have a little bit of background noise going on, if you can check that.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Sure.
Shoot. Yeah, hello?
Yeah, wow, that's much louder. Okay, so anyway, what about where do you stand on separation of church and state issues?
Church and state issues, like...
Do you believe that church and state should be separate?
Yeah, I believe state and most things should be separate.
State and what?
And most things?
I think people should have, freedoms generally where the government's not that involved.
Okay, so you lean kind of libertarian.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is a good slice of atheists that are libertarian from what I've seen, right? I'm not going to say it's definitely not the numbers that you're going to find of left-leaning atheists, but I think libertarian probably would be the next group that I encounter.
Right, I'm fine with libertarian. The issue I want to discuss is the fact that atheists want to generally take over. They want people to be atheists. They want everyone to be on the same, what's the word I'm looking for? Same page. They want everyone to be on the same page. There's no reason to believe anything supernatural exists.
There's no evidence for any of it, and we should. It's logical and reasonable to want people to go along with this ideal, right?
I think that was a bit general, but I'm going to say let's go with that for the purpose of your call.
Okay.
I think it's less
So
about.
I'm with that too, but the problem is, I find that people on the right are going to be saying if the left-leaning ideas are immoral and the atheists lean towards the left, then you see why you need God and the right. You get what I'm saying?
I don't understand why we would need God, but I can understand if somebody...
I understand I don't understand that part either, but I understand they're saying that and why they'd be saying that.
Yeah, if they believe that a certain group is functioning in an immoral way, I can understand why they would be opposed to it. I would be opposed to something that I felt was immoral as well.
It's different being opposed to it than saying you need God for it.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
Those two different things.
Sure.
So they'll say, like, for example, let's go with some positions. There's first off, there's the First Amendment. It seems to, from the right, they feel is being attacked in general. The rights to bear arms, the Second Amendment.
The First Amendment. So let's look at that. Let's look at the First Amendment. So for example, Jeff Sessions just announced that they've got like a new religious liberty task force because they want to focus on oppression of Christianity in the United States, right? That Christians are being persecuted in this country and they want to make sure that doesn't go on. And I guess my question is, do you believe that Christians in the United States are persecuted?
No, I think a lot of these things are just very blown very much out of proportion. There's a lot of talking going on and yelling at each other. But
so then on the first point,
there's no legislation being passed that's saying that. There is on the left side though. There's like, for example, in New York right now, landlords cannot misgender someone. If they misgender somebody, they can get fined or something. I don't know the exact things, but these are like actual attacks on a mistake for someone from the left.
I'd have to look into that.
Right. I mean, a mistake versus like you intentionally like misrepresenting someone on an application or something like that. I'm not sure.
Right. Should someone be forced to have to call someone by a gender? Is that moral to force someone to have to call someone? Like if someone calls me an idiot, I don't care. Call me an idiot. And it's more reasonable, I think, to tell me, don't let that bother you, over telling me, oh, we should get this guy in trouble for calling you an idiot.
Okay, so here's the thing. Let's just look at this.
Yeah.
According to Snopes, there's a claim that a new New York City law prohibits discrimination against transgender community. New York City has released new guidelines regulating discrimination on the basis of gender identity. The claim is property owners in New York City will be fined $250,000 for using improper pronouns due to new transgender laws. They have ranked this as a mixture. And they said what's true about it is that the New York City Commission on Human Rights released new guidelines in December 2015 regarding discrimination on the basis of gender identity or expression. What's false about it is that accidentally referring to a transgender person with the wrong pronoun in New York City will result in a $250,000 fine. So that part is not true.
It makes sense they would release that because Obergefell.
So releasing guidelines, basically saying here's how to deal with this issue. Here's how to deal with a transgender person, right? Here's how to be sensitive to the transgender issue, in my opinion, is fine because landlords are going to have to deal with people who are transgender, and so it's good for especially a Commission on Human Rights to deal with, hey, here's the proper way to deal with the situation. And since they're not going to be fined if they don't do it, is there a problem with simply issuing a statement saying that you think that somebody should be treated in a certain way?
With respect to how they identify.
I don't think there's rights to how you should be treated. I think there's rights to life and the pursuit of happiness and different things like that. But how someone else is going to treat you, I don't think there's a right. They're going to start.
Well, wait a minute. This is the New York City Commission on Human. There's a New York City Commission on Human Rights, and I think it's kind of
the rights issue. I think this is a human behavior situation that they're trying to control, which I don't think.
How are they trying to control it? In what way are they trying to control it?
By telling people how they. By whatever you want to.
It's called a guideline. Do you understand what a guideline is?
I know. That's why
Okay,
I'm like.
a guideline doesn't force you to do something.
I know. I get that.
Okay, the New York City Commission on Human Rights releasing a guideline is not compelling you.
Right. Okay. Fine. I think we're a little off point, though. The point I was making initially.
Well, it's not, though. It's not off point, because what happens is when somebody says, hey, the left is off, off their nut here, right? So this is.
I made a mistake, and I'm admitting.
It's not a mistake, though. I mean, it's what I'm saying is. It's something that happens a lot, right? So that when I hear this a lot from people who are like, hey, it's almost I don't know. Anyway, I guess my thought is, if we're not going to take these point by point, and I agree with you, we probably shouldn't, then what are we going to talk about in this call?
No. We should take this by point, but I think.
Well, then this is going to be a very
talking about the
painful call
and the legal stuff over the actual matter of.
I guess I'm not here to debate whether you should be left-leaning or right-leaning, right?
I know.
What I'm doing is
the overall idea. Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You were saying your view.
I'm just saying that I'd like to know what the call is about. You lean toward conservatism. You're an atheist. You're allowed to be an atheist. You're allowed to be conservative.
Sure.
Initially you were saying, hey, the problem that I have is that I can't feel aligned to the atheist community all the time. I totally understand that. I'm not going to fix it for you on a call. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, so I want to. My idea is this show gets thousands of viewers at least, and I think it needs to be brought to attention, put out there that. There is oh my gosh, I should have written this all this down. Okay, that there's the
pro tip for future callers.
What?
I said that's a good pro tip for future callers to write the thoughts down. I think that's actually, I'm not making fun of you. I think that's actually a really good idea.
I actually did write all this stuff down. The problem is I have a very weird situation of how I can deal with this call.
Okay.
I can't really be sitting and reading what I wrote.
That's fine.
Right now.
Sure.
That's fine. Like I said, I'm not mocking you. I really do think it's a good idea.
You can mock me. It's okay. But anyhow, so the thing is, if there's people on the right who think that the left-leaning agendas are immoral, I think it's important for atheists to understand each other's views on that issue in itself, not always just be attacking about whether the Bible is true or God is real or anything like that, because this is I think this is more of a serious matter that actually
I think atheists do attack each other over these things, though. I think they do hash it out, and I don't think it gets resolved very well most of the time. I mean, I've seen enough resolution that I do think it's worth having the discussions, but at the same time, I've seen a lot more where it's just devolves into conversations I wouldn't want to be party to. So the problem that I guess, if there's going to be an honest dialogue, I'm fine with that. People can have an honest dialogue that goes on and on and on, and I don't have an issue with it. But when it just devolves into two people that are talking past each other, I don't see the point of that continuing. But I definitely see atheists often saying, we don't have to and we don't agree on anything but we don't believe a God exists.
Right.
I mean, I've seen atheists say that, and we say that on this show, that there's a reason they compare it to herding cats, because atheists are all over the map on issues, and I agree that we do have general left leanings. I'm not disputing that part of it, but there should be no assumption about what an atheist believes when you meet somebody that's an atheist, because you can't tell. Like I said, there's a pretty.
Oh, that's a good.
You have to ask the question.
No, I'm saying that's kind of to all atheists. You can't assume. Because it's just, we don't believe a God exists, and as you're pointing out, this doesn't really inform a whole lot, right? We say that all the time because people are like, oh, how does this, so then that's your worldview. And it's like, it's not really much of a worldview because it doesn't inform a lot. If it did, we'd have a lot less division within the community.
Right, but there is something there, though, because at the end of the day, there is a culture in play from atheists, especially with the social media and everything. You'll find just from the internet and everything of what people are seeing with the atheist movement, because there is definitely an atheist movement, that they're all lining up politically generally and on the same views. A majority of it seems like this from majority of atheists.
But there are
atheists I speak to.
Yeah, but there are definitely there's definitely other forums though that are what I would call is backlash to this. right? Like, I think there's definitely atheist groups that have a backlash to this and that are, generally detested by people on the left because they are supporting all kinds of things that they consider to be misogynistic, racist, blah, 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 blah. And so you get this kind of divide. But I think there are communities of atheists that are right-leaning and that are in some way, I don't want to just say that they are only a reaction to the left, but in some ways they're reacting to each other. But the reality is...
Yeah, I guess I agree with that.
Yeah, and so there are right-leaning atheists who are, and some of them are, and I'm not saying that people on the left don't get angry and that there aren't angry people on the left, but I'm saying that I've run into a lot of angry people on the right who are part of groups where they are definitely having some kind of forum happening.
Well, it's definitely nice to hear. But
well, I mean, it's true.
The initial thought of me making this call was just about the idea that atheists seem to be, with all the outspoken ones, and the general rule seems to be more left-leaning. And there's an issue that I think that needs to be discussed more with the fact that people on the right will find left-leaning atheism to be immoral. Left-leaning people, I mean, in general, to be having immoral stands.
Okay. Well, here's what I want to do then, Andrew, because I believe, I agree with you that it definitely is an issue. It is an observable fact about the community. I think that what you're saying is correct. And I think that if your goal with the call is to sort of bring it to attention, raise awareness, and say, hey, this is happening, and I have thoughts on it, and it affects me as a conservative atheist, that's a fair use of the show, to use it as a platform. I would also encourage you in this case to go to the show blog, right? So we post a blog at FREETHOUGHT Blogs, and you can find a link to the blog from the homepage for the Atheist Experience, and post your thoughts there as well. Feel free to use that forum as well to kind of share this conversation there. That's something else you can do to use the show to sort of get that going. So I would say, feel free to go and post to the blog. You're going to find a mix there of people, because we had some dialogues, a couple dialogues on abortion, for example, where people were disputing it quite a lot. Like, there was a lot of conversation going on back and forth that not everybody was in agreement with. So there's going to be a mix of people. It's going to probably be what you're used to. You're going to find a lot of people on the left, and you might find some support. When you go and post there, know that the first post has to be moderated. I went there today to post the show post, so I just want to warn people and kind of issue a sort of meekish apology. There were 14 pending posts, right? And I didn't even look at the timelines. But you might have to wait a little bit.
I feel bad leaving you going, because I heard this a million times listening to your show every single week. Okay,
so go and post and wait for your post to go through, and once it does, you can then post at will. Okay?
All right.
All right, well, thank you, Andrew.
Can I just say one more thing quickly?
Sure. Yeah, why not? You waited all show.
One thing, I think this is kind of important. This is something else entirely. For your show in general, I don't know if you have signs or saying what people in your audience should be doing or not, which I imagine.
No.
But I think
we don't have that budget.
I think it would be a good idea to make it a point that they know, if there's a sign or something that suggests not to be laughing at people calling who might have a view that sounds absurd, because I feel like I hear that, and I feel like that guy on the other line is probably humiliated.
You know what? No, you know what? To be fair, Andrew, you're not the first person to raise that issue. Okay, so people have different views on it, and there are some people who think it's kind of fun and funny, and it's just like it's part of the experience. Yeah. And there's other people like you who say, hey, I think this is kind of disrespectful to the callers, and I think that it's sort of a rude thing to invite people to call the show and then treat them in a way that humiliates them. So I think
that's what's going on. I think the audience is responding, but yeah.
I think it is there's times, I'm going to be honest with you, there are times when I'm on the call, I don't know what people are going to say. And sometimes somebody will say a thing, and I can't help but laugh or crack a comment or something. And I don't even think about it.
You can't control them. I just figured maybe a sign or something.
My intent is never to hurt somebody's feelings. Right? I think I would feel bad if the person was genuinely hurt by that.
No, I don't think anything bad. You guys do great. Okay. I'm on the right, but I'm also I'm not on the left at all with anything. But when it comes to atheist stuff, you guys are I learned all this stuff of understanding, critical thinking, and different things from you guys. And I actually became an atheist listening to you guys, honestly.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your call.
All right.
Yeah. Bye, Andrew. Okay.
So he said not on the left with anything. So I wonder who he feels about those gay rights there. You can't have those.
All right. Well, we don't have a lot of time because we're well over, and you have something to do, so I need to check.
I'll have to take this the vehicle back.
Okay, so what is your thoughts on after show?
We can go ahead and do it as long as it's something quick, but I won't be able to
I don't know that it's going to be something quick.
Oh, no.
It's evidence for the reliability of the New Testament.
Oh, wow.
That's going to probably be a long one. I'm going to say that since we're already half an hour over, and I apologize to Jonathan, who's holding in the UK, maybe post the comment at the blog or try to call again. But
sure.
We've gone over, and I don't know that we would have time to start this particular call.
Yeah.
But I would say
normally I would be all for, but that
check with Bart Ehrman and see how that goes. I guess we could if you wanted to.
We can try to make it quick. I'm down for it, but it's just like that truck has
all right,
to
we'll
get back
try
to my
it. If you
friend.
have to leave, then leave. How about that? You can.
Okay.
All right, we'll give it a whirl then. All right, Jonathan, you're on. This is Tracie and Phil, and you're calling to talk about the reliability of the New Testament.
Hi, Tracie. Hi, Phil. How are you guys doing?
Good, thank you.
All right.
Good. Well, let me just perhaps begin by noting that I'm a Christian theist, and I'm as such an evidentialist. And so my faith as a Christian rests entirely on the public evidence and nothing else. So I'm a Christian because I'm persuaded by the public evidence that Christianity is true objectively. And I get the sense from listening to this show, and I've listened to it for a few years, that a Christian is expected often to rest his faith in a single spectacular piece of evidence. But in my experience of investigating the case for Christianity, the evidence for the faith is cumulative in nature, right? So it's, and by that I mean that it rests upon a network of different lines of evidence, each of which would be insufficient if taken on their own, but which, when taken together, amounts to sufficient justification for believing Christianity to be true. Would you say that's a fair approach?
I think, yes. I mean, if ultimately it is conclusive, or what we would generally consider as conclusive, when you get to the end of it, just like building a case in a courtroom, I would say that yes, you can introduce different pieces of evidence that all come to the same, that point to the same thing. Except that I would hope that if we're talking about resting our lives on something, we could do better than a courtroom.
Right. So I'm not claiming certainty or 100% confidence. I mean, I'm claiming surety beyond reasonable doubt, and I think that's the best that we can do when it comes to evaluating and investigating evidence. Right?
Do we apply that?
Yeah. If you're saying that is kind of the best thing you've got, like the idea that you're talking on the phone to me is falls under that definition, then sure.
Right. So I'm sure beyond reasonable doubt that the external world exists and that the world wasn't created 5 minutes ago.
Okay. If that's our bar, okay.
Mm-hmm. And then there's also other things which you could say are slightly lower than that, but I'm still sure beyond reasonable doubt, such as, for example, that Julius Caesar was assassinated in the Forum, or that Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, or that Alexander the Great existed, or what have you. So there's things which are supported by such a substantial body of evidence.
Yeah, when we get into history, I get a little fuzzier, but I, at the same time, kind of defer to historians.
Mm-hmm. So to illustrate kind of the cumulative case approach to arguing for the truth of Christianity, we could consider how we might argue for the substantial reliability of the New Testament. Are you familiar with the concept of undesigned coincidences?
I would think that a coincidence by definition would be undesigned.
Right. Well, I mean, the way that I'm using that concept, the expression here, and that phraseology is not original with me. That was coined by William Paley, the famous Christian philosopher. Basically, it's when you have multiple sources which recount an event, and they interlock in a way that's unexpected if one source is borrowing from the other, or both are copying from a common source, or the story is being made up wholesale. So typically what you'll have is a source which will raise a question in the mind of the audience, which is answered in passing in an incidental and unintended fashion by another source. And so it provides evidence for for the veracity of that account. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, wait.
Not sure if I followed that too much.
Perhaps it's best explained by giving an example. May I give an example?
Sure.
So, for example, in John chapter 6, this is in the Gospel of John chapter 6,
okay.
You have the setup for the feeding of the 5,000 miracle. And in verse 5, we read about Jesus lifting up his eyes then and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him. Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so this people may eat?" And so it raises the question in the audience's mind, well, why does Jesus turn to Philip here on this occasion? Philip's a fairly minor character in the New Testament narratives. Why not turn to, say, Judas Iscariot, who had the money bag, or someone like that? Why Philip in particular? If we look over at John 12, which is 6 chapters removed from this narrative in John 6, in John 12, we learn in a different context that Philip is from a certain town called Bethsaida. Whereas we learn in Luke's account of the feeding of the 5,000, in Luke chapter 9, that actually the event of the feeding of the 5,000 takes place in Bethsaida. And so then by putting together Luke 9 with John 6 with John 12, we have a cogent explanation for why Jesus turns to Philip in John 6:5, because Philip's a local guy, he knows what these shops are to buy bread. But Luke does not mention him conversing with Philip, it just speaks of him talking to the disciples. So that seems to corroborate the reliability of the account.
Except that we don't know the conversation ever even happened.
Right, but this is an argument for this conversation having happened.
Right, but I'm saying, though, that if you have gospels that are written, you're talking about using a gospel to back up another gospel?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess some of the gospels are reliant on other gospels.
Right, but when you have for example,
I think maybe we can cut this short, because I mean, we know that the New Testament has interpolations, right? We know that there are sections that have been added and altered, and that's not disputed, is it? I mean, are we going to dispute that, or are you good that the ending of Mark, for example, is like an addition? The adulterous woman story was put in later. It's not in all the texts.
Right.
Are we in agreement on that?
Right. The John 7:53 through 8:11 and the ending of Mark.
So we agree that the text has alterations that appear to this day. Do we also agree that historians generally take a view that Jesus was some sort of a rabbi reformist, that he was not magical?
That's correct.
Okay, so if I want to defer to the body of the scholars in history on Jesus and who Jesus was and what I should think about Jesus based on what the best minds in the field have come to as a consensus to this point, then I should accept that, shouldn't I?
Well, for me, I want to know whether the scholarly consensus was reached on sound arguments and evidences. And as I look at the evidence that resulted in those consensuses, I don't find them compelling.
Do you believe that Jesus existed?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Why?
But not because of the scholarly consensus, although the scholarly consensus does affirm that, but because of the evidence. Right. So we have.
Now I have a friend who says that the historical evidence. I've got two, in fact, that say the historical evidence for the existence of Jesus is based on poor scholarship.
And who would those be?
One is Richard Carrier, and one is David Fitzgerald.
I have debated Richard Carrier, and I've had David Fitzgerald on a webinar that I run and conversed with him as well.
Then you know that they would take that same position. I guess for me, the idea is, do I accept the argument of a theist on the phone, or do I accept the consensus of historians? And for me, when it comes to history, I'm fine saying let's let the historical scholars hash this out. I don't really know why there should be an exception to somebody's pet religion to bend historical consensus and say, well, let's just say that these scholars just don't know what they're talking about in this instance.
Well, I mean,
you can go through it point by point, but so can Richard Carrier, and he can make his case for why Jesus never existed and those historians are not right.
I've read Richard Carrier's book on the historicity of Jesus, and it's a train wreck. And
not everybody thinks so, though. Not everybody says that. That's not, when you look at the reviews, that's not the consensus of the reviews. And in fact, some people will say, hey, this wasn't really a bad book. I have a few issues with it, but it's not that bad. It may not, but I still accept that it's the minority view at this point, and that if we're going to accept it, they have the task of changing the consensus of historians. I don't just throw out an entire body of research because a lay person doesn't agree with the historian. I mean, and what if you're going to use mechanisms to? It's almost like science when we were talking earlier and saying what is going to combat bad science, better science, and it's almost like saying that these historians don't understand how to use their own tools.
Well, I mean, for me, it's about the evidence, and it's not about...
Do you think they're not using evidence? Do you think the historians don't understand how to evaluate historic evidence? Is that what you're saying?
Sure. I'm competent to evaluate these arguments for myself and look into these evidence.
Yeah, you can evaluate it for yourself if you want, and people can evaluate the evidence for 9/11 and come to the conclusion that the official story is just a load of hogwash, and we didn't ever go to the moon, and the Earth is flat. But what I'm saying is, ultimately, I have to look at who is trained, who has access to the evidence, to the best evidence, who has the best minds in the field, who has the best capacity to evaluate it, understands these tools, developed these tools, right? And ultimately, they don't agree with what you're saying. I don't know how else to put it. You can sit and talk about it on the phone if you want. You're welcome to post it at our blog, but you're not going to change my mind by having a conversation where I understand historians basically say you're wrong.
And that's not how we settle the discussion. I mean, this is a discussion. This is a TV show about.
Right, but have it with a historian.
Right, that's the actual audience you need to
You
convince.
talking to me is not what matters. What I'm saying is there's a body of research that has dealt with this question, and they have come up with an answer that is not what you're saying. And if you want to change my mind, you need to change their minds. When you can go to the historians and convince them that your theory on this is the one that should win out, and when you can change that historical consensus, then you will have won. Then I will be sitting here saying, hey, that's the consensus of historians. If you can't convince historians, then you call somebody who's less qualified to evaluate it and try to convince them. What does that say? Really, is that even an honest way to approach it? If you think you have the better argument, put it to the people you need to change in order to change people's minds. That's the honest way to do it.
What is the point of running this show if you're only going to tell callers that they have to defer to people who agree with you?
No, I'm not saying people who agree with me. I'm saying I'm deferring to expertise in this case, right? And
I can defer to expertise as well, so I can bring up my scholars who agree with me.
Right, but it's not the consensus. Anybody, it's like we were talking about the bell curve earlier, where you can get fringe on either side, and that's fine. But when you're talking about the research, it's about a consensus. What you're basically doing when you call this show is saying, I can't convince the people who know about this, so I'm going to call somebody who knows less. I'm going to try to convince them. Right? Because that's less of a challenge to you. But if you really want people to believe what you are saying is correct, then my question to you is, why have you not been changing the minds of these historians? Why are you not writing to these journals? Why aren't you publishing in historic journals? Why aren't you telling these people that their theories are wrong and posting this for peer review, to be criticized by people who actually understand this evidence, to show that you actually have a good argument? Because you're giving it to people who can't evaluate it as well, and you think that's a good way to get it under the radar, because that is a dishonest way to do it. You know what should be done, but you're not doing it.
People are doing that. I mean, take, for example, Craig Keener's 4-volume commentaries.
Good for them. Then they're doing it the right way. Why don't you take their cue?
Well, I intend to.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right, and so that's going to be a wrap. That was our last caller. I want to thank the audience. I want to thank the crew. I want to invite people to come on down to KOENIG for some sandwiches tonight. Thank you, Phil, for staying extremely late, even though you had something else to do, and I should have been more sensitive to that. And so,
it's a very interesting show. But it's always fun.
I need the host be good stick. And so I think that's a wrap. Then
we'll get one of those
everyone.
non-rulers.